as people, we're so used to having this dominant way of looking at an ecosystem where it's like, oh, it doesn't have ears and it doesn't have eyes, so it can't hear or it can't talk to me. Sometimes just sort of trying to be calm in it and observing it and saying, okay, you are a billion-year-old ecosystem. You've been here before, so many species. You have an intelligence that I don't understand. Maybe I should try and just, respect this. Seaweeds are some of the oldest species on Earth. They originated around 1 billion years ago in the ocean, so they're older than coral reefs, they're older than sharks and dinosaurs, and think of the oldest thing it's probably older than that. And so evolutionary, they have really contributed to a lot of life that we see around. So all trees, grasses, shrubs, all of them originated from green seaweed. And so it's sort of this origin species that, has contributed to so much life. And in terms of us as marine, like mammals, we also sort of come from the ocean. We have oceanic ancestry as well. And in some way, I think the seaweeds have kind of grown alongside us, supporting a lot of, ecosystems along the way. And yeah, I think we've forgotten that they have actually supported us for so long. And we think of it as this waste ecosystem, just the word seaweed as well, to think of it as something that is wasted or not important is really so different from how we need to look at it, because these are some of the most important species we have on Earth right now. I grew up in Goa and I've spent a lot of time along the coast, and in the process of doing this I got really interested in reef ecosystems and other large marine mammals, and I spent a lot of my early career working around these ecosystems. And then in the process of doing this research, I traveled to coastal Tamil Nadu for some work, and it was then that I was fortunate to meet a community of women that collect seaweed, and that sparked my interest in understanding the rest of the seaweed sector. And when I came back to Goa, I realized we also don't look at our own seaweed forests and our own seaweed species, and we don't value them much at all. And they're completely absent when it comes to policy, and there's no law that protects these species. And that's sort of how I got really interested in it, and I thought, okay, people spend a lot of money buying seaweed as food in other parts of the world. Why not try to do something like that here? Over the last 8 years, I've been swimming around seaweed forests a lot. And when I first started, it was quite alien. It was this new ecosystem, and I was actually quite scared of being in the deep ocean around it. It's quite a dense ecosystem. So even on the surface, it might look a bit, patchy. It looks quite pretty. It's shining in the water. But when you go into a forest, it's really overwhelming. Sometimes you get caught in it. Sometimes some random thing will touch you. And sometimes it gets in your head and you're like, oh God, I'm in this wild entity, and anything could happen. But I think over the years of being in the seaweed forest, I've never been harmed or hurt. If anything, I feel protected in the forest. And I think it comes from this respect that I have for it, and this sort of understanding that I cannot harm it, and I need to sort of try and listen. Every time I'm in the forest, I see something beautiful. The other day I was panicking because I was kind of getting stuck in the seaweed, and then suddenly there was this huge stingray that just flew, swam by me and looked me in the eye, and it was so lovely. It was this big, gentle, knowledgeable creature that was it's fine, it's chill, you can get out of this, relax. And yeah, and I was just so excited to see it, and I was so happy that like eventually I just got unstuck, and I was less panicky, and I was so, yeah, just happy to be in the ocean. So today's harvest we did primarily Sargassum. Sargassum is a species, or a genus rather, of seaweed that we have very abundant in India, and this is its main season. So the seaweed that you see in the ocean, it's mostly Sargassum right now. Generally, the species looks like this. It grows upwards in the ocean, so it will sort of attach itself to the bottom of a rock with a hold fast. It's a root-like structure, but it's not a root. And then it'll grow upwards towards the light. And to help it do that, it has these really small air bladders, which are filled with air, and so it helps the seaweed move upwards towards the light. And another cool thing about all seaweeds, and Sargassum as well, is that while it does not have a root system to absorb nutrients from, it absorbs nutrition from the entire body. So all of the surface area will absorb nutrients, and that's why it's also quite densely packed with nutrients, because it's constantly like a sponge sucking nutrients out of the water. So something that I notice every time I'm swimming in a seaweed forest is the amount of baby fish that you see around. Seaweed forests are really important for breeding juvenile fish, which eventually go out into the open ocean and become your pelagic fish, which you consume in your fish thali. And so conserving seaweed forests is incredibly important to make sure that we are preserving our fish breeding grounds. Turtles also very actively feed on seaweed, and so this forms the base of their like food chain. And so this as an ecosystem is just as important as reefs for supporting fish stock and marine diversity. We primarily harvest Sargassum, but these are a couple of other species that we see in the tide pools, and they're in this box here. This one is Sargassum, the main species that we harvest. There's another brown species called Dictyota, which is usually found more at the bottom of the tide pool and is generally quite a short and clumpy seaweed. Then we've got Spatoglossum, which is another species that is generally taller but still found at the bottom of the tide pool. This one has a very distinct raw mango flavor. And then we have sea grapes, or Colopa, which are another edible species you find in the tide pool. However, because they're found in very small quantities, we do not commercially harvest them. And then the last one that we have here is Padina, which is also called sea fan. This has a more bitterish flavor profile and generally quite a really interesting texture. And underwater it kind of looks like shells or fans underwater, and hence it's called sea fan. So when I'm in the seaweed forest, I kind of ask it whether I can harvest from it. It also comes from this practice by this person who wrote a book called Braiding Sweetgrass. Her name is Robin Wall Kimmerer, and she talks about the honorable harvest. And certain principles in the honorable harvest that are used by indigenous communities in different parts of the world are: you first treat this ecosystem as your kin. You don't treat it as something you have dominion over. You treat it as like your grandmother or your aunt or your uncle, or a species that you have come from at some point. And that changes your relationship with it, because you won't sell your grandmother or you won't hurt your grandmother. And so now I ask the seaweed forest, can I harvest? And sometimes it says no, and it's just in my mind, obviously, but I'm learning to respect that sound. So even today when I was swimming past a really like nice looking bunch of seaweed, and I thought, oh, this is perfect, it looks really healthy, it looks really clean, I should harvest it, but something said no. And I think now that I think back, it was the only fresh, clean one that I saw, and so maybe it's going to go into its reproductive phase, and maybe it's important to leave it there. And so just kind of listening to it sounds a bit woo-woo and a bit crazy, but I do feel that somewhere it is, this active point of listening is important and something that we've lost over many years and something we have to relearn. Because whether we like it or not, we're incredibly dependent on these ecosystems, and if we don't learn to respect them, we won't survive very long. In terms of seaweed, the reason I'm so interested in it is also because it talks about coastal commons. So if you have a seaweed farm, it's going to be, say, in this bay. It's going to involve other marine actors. So you have the fisher community, you have the clam harvesters, you will have tourism, you will have like port. All of these activities have to make space together to allow seaweed farming to happen. And I think this co-management is important to make sure that fisher communities also continue to have rights to this area, because these are spaces that fisher communities know best. They join their houses, it's close to coastal villages, and so I really feel like seaweed farming is one of those ways where coastal communities can still have control over the intertidal area by farming in it in the future. That's one reason. And another, I think, is that seaweed farming generally could help communities or people that live by the coast transition into just economies that are beneficial, but also beneficial to the ocean as well as to the people. Yeah, we've seen that fish stocks are declining, it's getting harder, more expensive to fish, and a lot of coastal community members don't want to be engaging with the sea. And that's completely fair to want to move away from a profession. But should people still be interested in living along the coast and engaging with the ocean, I think with seaweed farming, it's particularly interesting because there are ways to make an income while having this regenerative economy.
Getting ready to chant the letter M together like bumblebees 3 times, inhaling deeply.
So recently, Titli and Arnav, who are underwater videographers who I work with, and myself and a few other people put together this exhibit called Step Into the Sea, where we shot the seaweed forests underwater and then projected it in a room on land. And a lot of people came to watch it because they've never seen Goa's underwater seaweed forests, and they didn't have to swim. They could sit in a room and experience it. And a friend of mine who has been following my work for many years, he came up to me and he was like, I felt like crying when I was in the seaweed forest because it suddenly felt so moving to be sitting in this room and you can see this beautiful ecosystem, and I've never been moved in the way that, when you talk about seaweed as food, like I've not felt that connection that I have when seeing it and being immersed in it. And I really thought that food was a way to connect people with an ecosystem. But actually he was like, food makes you disconnect from an ecosystem. And so actually I found that art and bringing people into the ocean is a much stronger link to protecting it, and something I want to do more. We all are basically mammals, and so we have these nerves on our faces which connect to your vagus nerve, and these are called your mammalian dive reflex. And so it's basically your body remembering that you actually know how to be in the water. And so when your face comes in contact with water, your nerves on your face are activated and it calms your vagus nerve, so it calms your heart and it calms your lungs. And it slows your heartbeat and lets you need less oxygen, basically preparing you to dive. And so the more time I spend in the water, the more I realize how much calmer I am. And that's because your vagus system and your parasympathetic nervous system is very active in water. It's really calming you down. I think as women, there's so much pressure to look a certain way, for your body to look a certain way. And I find that when I'm underwater, I don't care what my body looks like. I just care about what it feels like. And it's so amazing that I can hold my breath and swim underwater, and my legs are strong enough to do this. And you know that the more I do this, the more muscle I build to be able to do this. And I see a lot of other women who engage with the ocean also just feeling more comfortable in their bodies. And there's no male gaze telling you what to look like underwater. You know, you can look like whatever you want. I think for me, it all comes down to the fact that I really want people to know that these ecosystems exist. And I don't want them to be in a conservation silo. I don't want it to be like, oh yeah, you know, like coral reefs, they're beautiful, we need to protect them. That shouldn't be the case with seaweed. Coastal communities engage with it as a resource. And so we also want to talk about it in the terms of how it does move into different supply chains. And when talking about people and a resource, food is an interesting conduit to have this conversation, to say that, okay, you know, try it, taste it. This is one way of connecting with this ecosystem. And so I don't think I'm adamant about people eating seaweed. It's fine if you don't want to eat it. You know, it's also good for your skin. It's also good for pet food. It also reduces methane content in like animal feed. It can be used as a bioplastic. You can make clothes from it. You can make alternative vegan protein. You know, there is literally like so much you can do with seaweed, and it's already in so many things we use. It's in your toothpaste, it's in jams, it's in ice cream, it's in fire extinguisher foam, it's in clarifying beer, it's in textile dyes. And so really the conversation goes much more beyond food. Food is what we work with right now, but we're also really just in general wanting to talk to people about seaweed as this incredible ecosystem, but also the potential that it has in so many other things. So there's a whole global community of people that work in seaweed, and we meet at seaweed conferences in different parts of the world. And if you talk to anyone who works with seaweed, the reason they do it is because it gives them hope. And I think right now we're seeing so many things torn apart and so many things destroyed that it is really hopeful to say, okay, why don't we grow something? And what will happen when we grow this amazing thing with a community of people. So yeah, I do it because it helps me sleep at night. I really enjoy it. And it's honestly the thing that keeps me sane. I'm really grateful for the seaweed forest actually. And I feel that as long as it thrives, I will also thrive.